America, in Colombia right now. And it's just a pleasure to be here with colleagues from Unicef, Latin America, who have been leading a really interesting process along with Uninorte, Universidad del Norte, from Barranquilla, Colombia, contributing to the whole social and behavior change discussion that UNICEF has led globally. So just to mention, Chris Mori is with us. Hi, Chris. From British Columbia, Victoria, where our team, the CI Global, is based. Sadly, Warren Fick, our dear colleague, is not with us. And I have to say that I really thank you, Kasia, for accepting it to continue this dialogue, which we were planning to have. We were planning with Warren. So for us, it's also like a space to also share, just some thoughts if anyone wants to share around Warren's, contribution to the field. But he was very interested in this debate. He was particularly interested in the Latin America perspective and contributions and critique of the whole SBC guide that UNICEF New York has been building, and was, the first to jump in and say, yeah, let's do not only this session, but hopefully more sessions, debates, as things get more, there's more dialogue around this SBC discussion. And as you may have seen in the note that we sent, we shared some of his thoughts. So I hope that some of you have looked at them, and then I'll share them through the chat. So basically, it's a welcome. It's a pleasure for us, CI, and I'm speaking on your behalf also, Chris. Thanks for being here, because this is something that we really support. It's dialogue, debate, and so this is a space to listen to our colleagues from Latin America, share some knowledge for those of you that speak Spanish. We had this first session on the 17th of October. We're going to circulate a drum beat in Spanish, which is called Son de Tambora, for those of you that are not subscribed, which actually goes through the whole history of the process. And we hope that this is the first of a couple of sessions. So, Kasia, thanks for your time, for sharing your thinking. And just to say that our colleague Jair Vega is going to be monitoring the dialogue, but not participating because he's got a bad cold, but he's going to be around. So thank you, and good morning and good afternoon, and thank you, Kasia. So over to you, Kasia.
Thank you, Adelaide. Thank you, Chris, representing the Communication Initiative, for co-organizing this conversation with us. I prefer mentioning the word dialogue and conversation rather than meeting and event, because it brings us more close together. So yeah, hello everyone. As I said, good morning, good afternoon, eventually good evening. From here, Panama, a very sunny, beautiful city today, for participating on this dialogue. So the question that I would like to pose to us to reflect across this an hour and a half we're going to be together is, why this dialogue and why now? But before I start with some background and inviting the participants, allow me to recall the inspiration for bringing this constellation of people together. And as Adelaide was saying, the name is Warren Fick. So Warren Fick was the founder of the Communication Initiative. And I personally, I had the joy of meeting Warren and Adelaide this year in person here in Panama, in the regional office, when they came to visit us, the team, to strengthen our partnership and the work we do together. So we planned this event in that occasion with the intention of bringing what Latin America and the Caribbean keeps on shaping in the field of SBC and fostering the SBC. Warren was so glad at the time during our informal conversations that I realized from my perspective that portraying SBC made in this region to the CI members was a reason of being proud and a reason of belonging to the field. So I guess many of you may recall through him and through his content in the Communication Initiative that Warren has critical views about SBC. From his views, SBC should be less prescriptive and more constructive with communities, less attached to donor requests and more according to the view of the plurality of community actors, including indigenous populations. Warren is supposed to be here, as Adelaide said, moderating this panel, a role that I'm now taking on his behalf. I'm honored to do so, and I'm putting the intention of him bringing us together today, and I dedicate this meeting to his memory and to his permanent presence in the field of SBC. So please join me in this feeling as we go speaking with all of you, maybe bringing a story or whatever you feel like it will be appropriate to share during this meeting. Having said that, so now to the main subject. The other reason to get us very inspired is the occasion of the celebration of the 35th anniversary of the Conventions of the Rights of the Child, an inspiration to keep us working hard from Unicef, but not only, from civil society organizations, government, and across the world. Coming to action in 1989, the Convention of the Rights of the Child became the most widely ratified human rights treaty in history that helped to transform children's life across the world. But as we speak now, here in this dialogue, we know that we still have a long run for children to enjoy a full childhood with a family that loves them, with a school that they can learn and play, with access to health, to protection, and to have access to a clean environment, and etc., right? And because of this continuous violation of rights in which UNICEF are in which children are forced to leave schools, to do hazard work, to get married, to fight in wars, or they are locked up into the outer prisons without access to justice, is that we are here to reflect what is the role of SBC. What about SBC to this? So this is why UNICEF exists, as many of you know, and also realize its mandate, right? As UNICEF states, it's up to our generation, this one, to demand that leaders from governments, businesses, and communities fulfill the commitments to take action to the child right now, once and for all. Social and behavior change, or SBC, it's a set of approaches deriving from social and behavioral sciences, which is a which fosters actually multi-level sort of positive changes in support to these rights. We work in collaboration with governments, with members of civil societies and individuals to both understand and help the cognitive, social, and structural drivers and collective behaviors, mostly coming from social norms, social cultural practice, and beliefs. From the Latin America and the Caribbean, the cradle of social sciences and community practice nurturing SBC, we pay attention to a very special focus, which is a deeper level of engagement with people. Also on critical consciousness, on the power imbalance, on the understanding and valuing singular cultures and supporting health practices, foundational education, care and child protection, hygiene and environmental issues, and social protection. Fundamentally, we also support systems. We help governments to identify the needs of the citizens, and through data and evidence, and through the support of social and behavioral sciences, to design and provide more adequate services to citizens, to bring the society together, their voices, and mainly adolescent voices. So, colleagues from the field, to bring us to this event and these questions that keep on our mind and animating us in an everyday life of an SBC person. What is the role that SBC is going to ensure to foster the child rights, which are now at risk of retrocess? So I have a fortune today to have very bright speakers, bright minds to address this question, starting with Ludmila Palazzo, the focal point of child and adolescent rights in UNICEF, Lacro. And then going to Robert Cohen, the founder of Rainbow Communication, as I said, the legendary Robert. And then to Markel Mendes, SBC specialist from Lacro, all the way to Luciana Lierman, our SBC officer in adolescent development in Argentina country office. As part of the moderation and the respondents, we have the honor of having Rafael Obregon, UNICEF representative in Nicaragua, Chris Mori Program Director of the Communication Initiative, and Professor Jair Vega from Norte. So without further delay, Ludmila is going to enlighten us with the views of adolescents during the preparation for the celebration of the 31st anniversary and the topic of access to justice. Allowing us to explore where SBC could play a role. So Ludmila, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I am happy to be here. I'm not an SBC and I'm SBC specialist, but I'm a new friend, Robert. I'm not an old friend, but I'm a new friend to SBC. So what I'm going to try to perhaps discuss with you is how did, children talk about social norms and behavior change when they gave their views in this process of commemorating 35 years of the convention, because children do bring it up in many forms in what they have said when they were asked in national consultations that were facilitated by UNICEF offices with our partners in 20 countries, with around 5,000 children, 1,000 through focus group discussions, which is a lot because there were small group discussions of maximum 10 children, so 1,000 from all these countries is a lot, and 4,000 through U-Report. And what children were asked is, do they know their rights? Do they know they have rights? Do they think there are any specific groups of children that do not have rights? What do they do when they want to claim their rights, when their rights are denied or disrespected or violated? Do they know where to go? Do they know the mechanisms for restituting or claiming their rights? And the other thing we asked, and we got very interesting questions, very interesting answers and questions as well, was what's justice for them? And how did they relate to justice, the justice system? And when we think of SBC, I think that the convention is for 35 years now asking us, adults from different roles, right? Parents, teachers, educators, institutions, people who make decisions, and also key informants or public influencers. What children are and the convention are asking us is to change the relationship to them. Right? It's to democratize the relationship between adults and children. And all what they said is that we are not nearly there, right? They don't feel seen by the institutions, by people, and by the systems. So to change the systems, I think, especially a system that is as complex as the justice system, right, which is part of the child protection system, to change that from the point of view of is really get children to know their rights, get adults to understand that children do have rights and that they are with them to respect, protect, fulfill, right? Adults in the broad sense, right? In different roles, as I was saying. So I think that when we are talking about the ecological model, going from this individual, which is children and members of communities, we could think of how the social workforce, right, which is in the communities, in the services, how do we incorporate justice professionals in our work of SBC so that we can get them understand that they need to get closer to children, right? They should be another one of the services, as the school is a service, as education is a service near them. Health professionals are closer to children than justice, but children are claiming for justice to arrive. And in this consultation, before I share with you what they say on social norms and behavior change, we did listen to very specific, important groups of children. This consultation was very diverse. So we did have indigenous children, a good representation. We had a lot of children on the move that said very specific things related to their fear to look for justice. And also we heard children with disability, many of them as well, and LGBTQI children, and most importantly, children that are very rarely heard in this process, which are children that are cared by the states. So children who are living in institutional care, or their beneficiaries from the child protection system, and children that are in conflict or in contact with the law. So those groups were very well represented in the consultations, and I'm gonna share with you some inspiration for your conversation on what children said. Maybe I can't share yet.
We see your screen, Ludmila.
You see? Yeah. Okay, so let me get the presentation. So, okay. So I'm going to start here because before was just talking about the process that we undertook. This process was led by country offices with partners to reach these groups of children. It was between September and November, so it was really 2 months or nearly 3 months to listen to all these children. So what do they say about their rights? They call on justice from their understanding of rights. They say that in theory, we all have the same rights, but often the economic or social factors, not everyone can access those rights equally because some people are more privileged than others. So they still relate, rights to privilege in the sense that they feel inequality with respect to their rights. And for them, justice means many things, right? And they have a very comprehensive view of the justice and the system and what's fair to them. So what they say is that it means a guarantee. It means to have some guarantee. If we want to live well, the first thing we need is the right to justice. So they see this in a much broader perspective. And they also say that respecting rights and punishing when there's no evidence. So don't judge someone if they didn't actually do. What they are saying is a very sophisticated idea on the due process, right? On the right they have not to be judged without a reason for it, right? We've condemned they don't be given a sanction or punishment based on what they didn't do. So they are asking for fairness as well. So this is also them to asking people that commit crimes or acts of violence can be held accountable based on evidence, right? So people who can afford lawyers, they are the ones who get justice. So justice for very few people that have that system more accessible to them. Now, the role of state and institutions, they say that the state needs to make sure our rights are respected without judging us for our stories, right? SBC has a very important role there because that's where we want to change, right? We want children to be respected with their stories, but without being judged for it. Authorities do not take children seriously. So they are saying that there's still an adultocentric relationship, between authorities and them. Then they mention other things like the police treat them aggressively and with prejudice, and that they are mistreated by the very people who are supposed to protect them, as you know. So about their rights, I think this is the main role for SBC and for your discussion. What children say is that we need education and information in territories because many children do not know their rights. So when we think about the superficial knowledge of their rights, they do know they have rights, but they don't know them so well. And sometimes there are groups of children that do not think the rights are for them, which is very dangerous. So what they are calling for is more education on rights. So they say this is, I guess, a child from living in an institution that says, I didn't know how and when my rights were violated. I knew I had rights, but I didn't know when they were violated or where I could report it. So they don't know the mechanisms if they don't know their rights. And that's really important to empower them by knowing their rights. Otherwise, they will never be able to claim for it. No, we have rights, but we don't know what they are. When I entered the institution, this is again in institutional care, they never talked about rights. They mentioned that we had duties, obligations. This is very, very fashionable right now, right? To remind children that they have obligations before they have rights. So that we had to fulfill.
Just to say that you have another minute to wrap up.
Okay,
so then
they have to fulfill certain responsibilities, and they never learn that they had rights as children, especially if they are under protection. So let me see if I can go. So in the future, let's make sure kids know their rights everywhere. You could make videos and then they are talking for different kinds of communication about their rights where they are, in the environments and platforms where they are, because we don't get that information through those platforms. It's very difficult for them to access information on their rights. And it's important to recognize that they're all different. There's cultural and identity diversity, and there SBC also has a role. So there are people saying that, you know, especially kids with disability, that says that we need to be patient, that they're often left out of this discussion because people do not have tolerance. So indigenous children also want to be heard, and that lawyers should also speak their language so that they feel that justice is also close to them and for them. So migrant children say that even if they are not from this place, they're still children and they have the same rights. So they need to make felt confident and do not underestimate. And again, authorities do not take it seriously. And the distance from institutions, they claim that institutions, especially justice, should come to them and they shouldn't be going. They shouldn't have to go to the justice mechanisms. They should be arriving where the children are. So there could be people that gather their complaints to inform institutions, and then they also say a lot of things. So here they say a lot of things on oversight, because the organizations that are monitoring rights and do oversight of institutions are not always advocating with children and for them. So I'm going to stop here just for you to start this conversation on what do we want in another 5 or 35 years in terms of getting close to what children want from this transformation, right? Which is this very basic individual level transformation between adults and children so that we can get to transform social workers, social workforce, and systems for children. So how does SBC play a role in educating better children and in getting those messages at community and system level so that the rights will be for all children and that they all know how to claim them? So this is basically what we got. We're gonna share this with the Committee on the Rights of the Child so that they will incorporate the recommendations that they made in a manifesto. within the general comment that is being developed right now, which is on access to justice and mechanisms to claim rights. So this will be happening now in December, and hopefully we have a new version written by the committee in March. And for those of you that do not know what is a general comment, it is a consultative opinion that the Committee on the Rights of the Child builds based on consulting with different actors on a specific right, so that states can better interpret and better fulfill that right. So the big discussion now is on justice and the mechanisms for children to access it. So thank you very much, and I hope we can continue discussing based on what children told us. Thank you.
Absolutely critical. Thank you so much, Ludmila, for bringing these views, which is an excellent starting point based on the reality. So what's going on there? What is the opinion of children? So I think your, the way you cited the socio-ecological model, for us, it resonates a lot, because indeed it is an individual behavior in social change, but when it goes to the institutions, to the communities, to the laws, of course, we are affecting the whole system in which children are feeling deprived of the rights of access to justice. So thank you very much. So now I'm going to like to pass the floor to Robert Cohen. Robert, as I said, is the founder of Rain Barrel Communication. And Robert is going to bring us the memories of the impact on the CRC on UNICEF from his advantage of being a speechwriter, actually, of our former executive director, Jim Grant, from the 1990 to 1995. His perspective in communication in Latin America, as seen in his posts in C4D unit in New York, communication and child rights officer in Mexico, and the regional communication advisor here in Lacro. So with this rich trajectory, he will conclude with an appeal to use SBC as a strategic tool to advance children's rights amidst an interesting challenge political and cultural environment. Robert, without further delay, over to you.
Thank you, Cassia, and thank you all for the invitation. It came as a surprise and a delight. And I am dedicating my words to my dear friend, old friend, Warren Feek. He should be here. I had the privilege to serve as UNICEF Executive Director Jim Grant's speechwriter from 1990 until his death in 1995. Those were exciting times of rapid change. The fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989, the adoption of the Convention on the Rights of the Child the same year, the success of the Universal Childhood Immunization Campaign, the World Summit for Children also in 1990. For a brief window of time, there was hope that there could be a massive global peace dividend to shift military spending toward meeting the needs of children. When I came on board, JPG, Jim Grant, had embraced the CRC, but with some ambivalence. He had quietly resisted the convention first proposed by Poland in 1979. It took 5 years to convince him to throw his weight behind the CRC, according to his closest advisors. In the mid-1980s, he feared that making the convention a priority could undermine the push to receive UCI, Universal Childhood Immunization, that it would get bogged down in politics, in culture wars. With his emphasis on practical doability, that's what he called it, he felt that the world wasn't ready for the convention. But the stars suddenly aligned. UNICEF and its allies helped align those stars, and the convention quickly became the most widely ratified human rights treaty in history eventually ratified by 196 states, with the sole shameful exception of my country, the United States. Grant's last major speech was before the Third Committee of the General Assembly in November 1994, when he knew that he was dying. It was a full-throated commitment to all rights for all children. No longer was there a distinction between achievable and aspirational rights. He said the convention represents a revolution, a step forward for civilization, and he announced a major shift in UNICEF's programming. Henceforth, the child rights perspective would be integrated into all of its work. Universe was taking up the banner of child protection and child participation, adding it to the survival and development agenda that had been the core focus of Grant's tenure. As the CRC gained traction, I believe that Jim's thinking evolved. Was it the evolution of the son and grandson of missionaries, from moralist and technocrat to political visionary who raised the flag of human rights and democracy? Well, UNICEF began saying that democracy is good for children and children are good for democracy. In 1992, for example, UNICEF made its strongest statement yet on the subject of women's rights. In that year, it suggested that the apartheid of gender should be opposed as vigorously as the apartheid of race. Communication was always at the heart of Grant's child survival and development revolution. At the Animation for Development workshop in Warsaw in 1990, he said, quote, "It is clear that the field of communications, which is already a main force in social change, will gain power and influence rapidly if used well." He went on to say that successes in child survival and development, significant as they are just the beginning. They give an indication of what is possible when all channels of communication are mobilized, but they have not yet begun to scratch the surface of their potential. Grant didn't live to see the internet, the digital revolution, or social media, but he knew that they were just over the horizon. And he was very much aware of Latin America's leadership in the use of communication, social mobilization, community engagement, and advocacy for social change. From my own vantage point, first as speechwriter in headquarters, then as comms officer in Mexico, and regional advisor in Europe and Lacro, I appreciated enormously and learned a great deal from Latin America's long-standing intellectual leadership in the field of social change communication. Those historic contributions in theory and practice are nicely summarized in the Norte paper, Latin American Perspectives that Can Strengthen the SBC Model, so I won't repeat them here. But let me quickly share one transformational experience that stands out as the great highlight of my own career. In 1979, as Mexico's adults voted for their president and legislators, just under 4 million children around the country voted for their rights, as expressed in the CRC. It was the last election organized by what Mario Vargas Llosa called Mexico's perfect dictatorship, and children were the protagonists of a massive exercise of participation and free expression that marked the beginning of a new era in Mexico. It was UNICEF that proposed the initiative to the country's Federal Electoral Institute and co-organized it with them. But I don't share this as an example of best practice necessarily, but to make a couple of related points about our current situation. As we all know, we are witnessing shifts to the right and even extreme right in many countries around the world, starting in my own country and on display in several Latin American countries and elsewhere, of course. This shift, including the emergence of authoritarian governments and conservative social movements, threatens to undo many decades of progress in human rights, women's and children's rights first and foremost. In some places like Afghanistan, the backsliding is catastrophic. The children's rights agenda we are celebrating today faces new and formidable challenges. But as difficult as the current political and cultural environment is, I strongly believe that UNICEF has what it takes to rise to the occasion, as it did in Latin America when civil wars were raging in Central America and military dictatorships reigned in the Southern Cone. History has shown that under virtually all circumstances, it's possible to find allies and work creatively together with communities to create the space necessary to advance the rights of children. UNICEF, especially in Latin America, is the best communicating and advocating agency of the United Nations. Our SBC advocacy and communication efforts are needed now more than ever. Let us celebrate the 35th anniversary of the CRC with optimism, despite the worrisome trends we are witnessing. I am confident that our efforts, our granito de arena, will help swing the pendulum of history back toward human rights and social justice. And I just wanted to mention that I have a list of a number of initiatives, communication and social and programmatic initiatives that I think were unique in Latin America during the period I was involved from different parts of UNICEF. But it's not comprehensive, and I could share it. I had only mentioned the Mexican children's elections. But there's UCI, Days of Tranquility, Facts for Life, Crianza Esperanza, mayors, defenders of children, municipalities for children's rights, salt iodization, the Children's Peace Movement, the Animation Consortium, etc., Pastoral de la Niñez. So many wonderful initiatives from Latin America that really were leadership in social change globally. So thank you.
That was super, super inspiring, Robert. Thank you so much. I keep your words on the community, the creativity, the optimism, and the role of civil society organizations in movements around children's rights in this region as something that never stop flourishing. Super. So let us keep our thoughts, everyone. If you want to say something in the chat to address, an issue, a question, whatever, a comment to one of our speakers, I also put Robert's remarks here, a Word document. Do let me know if you have any issues to access. All right. So now we are going to pass the floor a little bit a level down, exploring what Robert was just mentioning on what is the beauty, what is the particularities of this region. So Markel Mendes, our SBC specialist from Lacro, is going to bring what we call the Latin American perspectives and the focus on how can we use these perspectives to strengthen systems. Over to you, Markel.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Cassia. It's really an honor to be here. Thank you for the opportunity just to share some ideas and about this ongoing discussion, because we have been doing a lot of reflection about the social and behavior change model, how we are adapting the model, but also generating exchange with the theoretical models in Latin America and the Caribbean region. So I will share, let me, wait a minute. Great, yes. of course, this is, as I said, an ongoing process. You are just confirmed that you are watching my presentation right now. No? Yes, thank you. So this is an ongoing process, and this discussion had been in development with the Uninorte team, the Universidad del Norte, leading by the Professor Jair Vega, but also with the SBC officers within Unicef, the SBC think tank. So there is many people, many thoughts here and in development now. So let me tell you about this framework. Of course, I have to mention this like evolution change process we have been living, going through from communication for development, C4D, to social and behavior change, SBC. Of course, change is always in the nucleus, in the center of this group of tools, approaches, practices, experiences, and also the recognition of cultural and socio-political contexts have been really important, and the community engagement, the participatory processes for social and behavior change. That's always there. And we have tried to be more like clear about the integration of social and behavioral sciences. We are talking about, of course, psychology, anthropology, history, economics, sociology, linguistics, for example, the hermeneutic, reflection about reality, about how we are we are generating, promoting, just working the changes we need in society in different levels. So that have been a really important transition, because as we all know, information is not enough, knowledge is not enough. This is an example about health, specifically about immunization. When you tell a mother, for example, or a family, it's important for your child to get the vaccine, this is not enough just to generate the behavior we're waiting for, the vaccination process, because there is many other elements influencing that decision. That could be at the psychological level, could be at the individual, your belief, misinformation, could be influences of the community dynamics, influences of peers, families, but also environmental elements, factors influencing the decision to go to the health center or no. This is only just an example of that. That's why, of course, if we want to promote social and behavioral change in a sustainable way, we need to consider not only the individual behavior, the individual factors, we need to consider the social and cultural dynamics. We know about that. And currently, the social and behavior change model at Unicef is based on two models: the behavioral drivers model, which consider the psychological factors, the sociological factors, the environmental factors, and also the socio-ecological model, as Ludmila said before, just consider different levels from the individual to the whole social environment ecosystem in which an individual, families, community groups, the whole society develops. Of course, it's important the basic principles, systems oriented, focus on people based on human rights. And this is, of course, a very broad vision about the approach. It's very clear, it's useful because this allows us to planning, not only to develop, to generate evidence, to develop research, but also for planning, for strategy science, for development of strategies and for implementation of our programs, tactics for social and behavior change. But why is important then just to integrate the Latin American and the Caribbean perspectives, not only theoretical models, not only strategies, perspectives, reflections, and continue this discussion about that. But because, as Robert said, we have a tradition in our region, a tradition of thinking, a tradition of alternative theoretical model, consider the dignity of people, consider the social, cultural practices, for example, from indigenous groups. So it's really important, and there is a need for systematized and general learnings about the experiences in Latin America and the Caribbean region, considering also the cultural diversity and acknowledging the assets, the local knowledge and capacities that we have at the community level. Now, this is We all know that, but in practice is not only clear, and it's important to maintain that in mind and at the center of our practices. So what we are doing right now, as I said, with Uninorte, the SBT think tank, within Unicef, with the social and behavior change officers, is develop this, and other universities in the region. In fact, we are developing these discussions about how this Latin American theoretical model, and you can see some of them, there is more, of course, there, and how these Latin American strategies could enrich, influence, and generate adaptation of our social and behavior change techniques, approaches, and technical tools. So, of course, when you think about the pedagogy of the oppressed, Paulo Freire, thinking this, the feeling and thinking, the colonial thinking, the participatory models, you start, wow, there is a lot of questions emerging from that point of view, because we are talking not only about, I want to influence a change of behavior, considering the experimental model. So I'm going to implement, experiment with people to change a behavior. We are talking now about what's the vision about development of progress of the people? What's the vision about well-being of this group of people? What's their belief, spiritual beliefs, for example? So there is a political point of view, political participation. So we are talking about autonomy, self-determination, and in that way, we can just start entering in the complexities of our communities, our groups, and the complexities of the participation, because we are changing the focus. This is not only about changing a behavior. This is not only about telling people to go to the school or telling people to go to the health center. This is more about why this is important for you, for us, why this could be a priority, and why this is changing our lives for better. So we open that discussion, and sometimes the center of the process is trust. So we are building trust. We are generating trust. We are generating cooperation, collaboration. And this is one of the reasons why it's really important for us to enter into this discussion and to enter into this theoretical model and strategies. As you can see, some of them, as I said, we are just prioritizing some of them to develop this discussion. This is an ongoing process, as I said, just to understand the process of, for example, education as a process of liberation, integration of feeling in the process of to consider this participation, co-creation of intervention for change reality. This is possible. I can change reality. You are telling me that I can have an influence in my context and really change reality. We have to continue strengthening that perspective. And the same with the strategies. Of course, there is a lot of different strategies, and we will see an example in a minute, because I have one more minute to finish. And so we can see different specific tactics here. No? And so solutions are in the communities. We know that, and we are working on that. And I just will present you briefly an example about, for example, how we are adapting human-centered design methodologies to this perspective for Latin American, the Caribbean theoretical models. So if we have human-centered design, and we're thinking about, strengthening empathy and designing, co-designing with communities and the governments, the local governments, just co-designing services, just to improving health services or education services. And we are also integrating behavioral science, just to understand what's the barriers for this behavioral change and how we can experiment on that. So we developed our research based on the scientific model, experimental methods. And then, of course, we are generating this data, understanding the barriers and trying to generate prototypes, interventions to change that. this is part of the process. But then we come with the Latin American methodologies, Latin American theoretical models. We are saying it's not only about this specific behavior. We need to understand how this group of people, this community, understand well-being, and which are their projections to the future. For example, we need to connect with the local knowledge, and also working for raise awareness in the sense not only rationalities but also emotionalities, and also local narrative imaginaries. That way we are trying to connect. Of course, I'm not saying this is easy, but in the practice is possible, just to generate empowerment, agency, self-determination, strength, and participation. So we are trying to connect this. This is an open discussion. I will insist on that. And talking about social and behavior change, how we can generate a transformative action, which is different approach to only behavior. The action transform reality. So just to finish on this, the Latin American approaches give us the opportunity to generate critical thinking and strengthen the diálogo de saberes, just underline the particularities in the Latin America and the Caribbean region. We're looking for continuing promoting autonomy, self-determination, and the capacity to build future projects based on diversity and equity. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Markel. Wow, so we are getting close to the end now, very soon with Luciana's Learman presentation, but Markel, you brought interesting points on the perspectives, which are the word views. So as our very influential magazine on SBC, so sorry, it's Blur, which means why don't you just behave is not any longer working for citizens. So when you connect with the word views and the perspective of what people think about development, it's far more easier to make some sustainable and long-term changes, right? So thank you for this, and valuing what matters, which is in this case, culture. So now passing the floor to my colleague Luciana Learman, SBC Adolescence Development Officer in Argentina Country Office, from a practical viewpoint, speaking on how the office is implementing a strategy focused on respectful, sensitive, and healthy parenting practices using some of these Latin American perspectives. So we are connecting all the dots now. Luciana, over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Katia. Thank you, colleagues, for the invitation. And it's a pleasure for me to be here and to be surrounded by colleagues with so much experience and knowledge about communications and SBC. Sorry for my voice. I having troubles with my voice, so I hope it could do my presentation okay. Or maybe I have to stop to drink water. So before I start, I will especially want to thank Cassia for this invitation and to give me the opportunity to share the experience from Argentina and in behalf of all the colleagues of Latin America to share the experience and the work that we are doing in the region. So thank you very much for the opportunity to share and to contribute to this exchange and learning dialogues. I'm excited to share with you the experience of Argentina, the strategy that has developed in the recent years. I will share a PowerPoint to let's do it. Okay. Here you go. It's okay. Are you seeing the screen? Okay. I'm not seeing you, so this is
yes.
someone.
Yes, we see you.
Okay, perfect. So
Yes,
thank you. I'm going to share with you, as I say, the intervention experience of Argentina toward respectful, sensitive, and healthy parenting practices. What was our starting point? Well, first of all, we define our problem. As we all know, the early childhood is a fundamental period for the development and the consolidation of fundamental rights. as during these years, the Foundation for Learning and Development throughout life are established. Argentina has made significant progress in reducing infant mortality, improving nutrition, and increasing enrollment rates in early education. However, important challenges remain. Persistence of mistreatment during parenting, barriers in accessing early childhood services, and practice that perpetuate gender stereotypes and violence. We have a vast regulatory framework in our country, and the comprehensive protection is supported by a wide range of law. Argentina ratified the Convention of the Rights of the Child in 1990, and 10 years later, passed its own national law that recovers the principle established in the Convention. The new protection system recognizes children as subjects of rights, guaranteeing their comprehensive development and the full enjoyment of their rights. 10 years later, in 2015, the new Civil and Commercial Code of the nation explicitly prohibits corporal punishment in any form, mistreatment, and any act that physical or psychological harms children and adolescents. But going back to the convention and the relevance of this instrument, the Article 18 and 19 also emphasize the rights of children regarding upbringing and protection against any abuse or other forms of mistreatment. I also want to share a specific general comment that complement the Article 19 that address and highlight that these practices and these forms of punishment are widely accepted and practice forms of violence against children. This comment highlights the need to address the widespread acceptance or tolerance of corporal punishment and to end such practices in all settings. And that was our point of answering this problem. What was the solution or the proposal of our country office to deal with this problem? Well, Unicef aimed to promote respectful and sensitive, healthy behaviors among parents, caregivers, and community, as well as strengthening decision makers' capacity. For that, we conducted a formative research during the last year, and we utilized these methodological approaches combined with quantity and quality methods, such as focus group, participatory workshops, and observation of brief interactions between children and their caregivers. Besides that, the research was based in two theoretical frameworks on two Unicef approaches, the social and behavior change framework and the nurturing care framework. The intersections of both frameworks capture knowledge, attitudes, and practices around parenting and identifies intervention opportunities to promote more responsive, protective, and plays that support child development. The methodological approach based on participatory model that reinforce the local commitment to the research and its results. This participatory model was based on a center on people, human-centered design, and that's why we laid the groundwork for working on the design of a strategy that recognizes and involves community members as agents of change. The intervention design was also validated in workshops where key insights were presented. Using a social mobilization approach, community perspectives, needs, and contributions were incorporated in the project creation and to build the solution. That's how we came to this C+ for positive parenting, our SBC strategy for ECD. We call it in Spanish, C+ para una crianza positiva. The first things we do involving the families was to identify which are the main activities we could do that they will be able to engage and to compromise in this development. The program involved families with an attitude favorable to the transformation of parenting practices, and we invite them to become parenting promoters in the community. We provide them with tools to encourage other families and to acquire new responsive parenting practices between parents and children. The program has three lines of intervention, or 3 pillars: the community awareness on parenting, strengthening parenting skills for parents and caregivers, and a third one that was the capacity building for education and care institutions. I will share with you the first 2 pillars that involve specifically families and community, and the third one was delivered by our colleagues in the ECD team. The solution, as I mentioned, include the community awareness on parenting. The first thing we do was to identify a logo or a slogan that engaged the community with the municipality and identify the municipality with the positive parenting strategy. We launched the strategy at a community event on the Children's Day during the month of the child, and we share the film, the documentary made by Unicef for the Parenting Month. And after that, we held a debate with the participants. And after the debate, we launched the strategy SEMAS. The strategy was also accompanied by the creation of a WhatsApp channel, SEMAS, and the WhatsApp channel is managed by the municipality, and Unicef are providing the content based on all the work we have done on parenting and good practices on parenting. So we are bi-weekly sharing content through that WhatsApp channel to the community. The second pillar was the action towards families. And we specifically worked on a program on skills for parenting. We invited mothers, fathers, and caregivers from the community to join these workshops, this program, along 4 meetings, and we share with them effective tools and discussions to find a way to deliver or to develop an adequate practice of parenting. As I said before, from the beginning, we invite them to join a parenting promoters group, and some of them were very interested to continue these activities with their community and to share their own experience from their childhood and to also foster new practices in the community. We now, after the workshops, we have already finished the 4 workshops. 2 mothers came to us and present a proposal to develop with the community, with the local authorities, to continue these activities in open spaces and squares of the community, to identify a strategy for bring to the family. And they also want to use the logo of SEMAS to identify these spaces, these public spaces.
Lu, tienes 2 minuticos más.
I'm finishing. I only just want to share our results that we achieved in this 4 months of implementation. I want to highlight that this is a very new strategy that we are carrying forward in this municipality. But we have a very good achievement in this time. As I said, we developed the parenting skills strengthening programs for parents and caregivers, and 15 parents and caregivers participate in these workshops. We also developed a parenting diary that was bring to the parents and caregivers to accompany and guide reflection between each meeting. We also elaborated a handbook for positive parenting, workshops, coordinators, and this handbook will be used for these promoters from parenting. And we reached 100 people that subscribe the CMAS WhatsApp channel. And as I said before, we received one project proposal submitted from community facilitators. So as a conclusion, I want to link this information we were talking about, this Latin America perspective and how taking it into account would contribute to mobilize better results and to change behaviors. The participatory model and social mobilization approach we use enhance caregivers' capacities and readiness to adopt new parenting practices, and also foster the active participation of community members who took on leadership roles to continue working on positive parenting together with the local government. And finally, I think that this SBC intervention is strengthening the system by contributing at least 3 elements of the system: in the planning, in the services, and in the social determinant as gender norms. Thank you very much for your attention.
Excellent, Lou. Thank you very much. I'm so sorry about, being having this bad role of cutting your mic, not necessarily like this, but constraining you with the time.
My problem was I lost the screen of the team, so I couldn't see you during my presentation.
No problem at all. No problem. Lou, what stick to my mind to your presentation were your three-pronged approach, as you said, the 3 pillars. So working to enable the environment around parenting issues and positive childhood, but also supporting the government and supporting the parents. So that's definitely an interesting viewpoint of, bringing these pieces together to be more effective on the change Argentina country offices aiming on parenting. So without further delay, I would like to call Rafael Obregon and Chris Morris to bring these bits and pieces together and form a beautiful puzzle from the contributions of our speakers here, or eventually complementing or addressing questions. So the floor is yours. Thank you, Rafael. Or Chris first? Who's coming first? Lou, would you unshare your screen, please?
Would you like to go first, Chris?
Yeah, sure. I can go first. I think your comments are probably going to be more informed by the Latin American experience than mine are. So I will be brief and maybe just try and set, a few points up for further discussion. First of all, I'd like to start by just saying I'm stepping in here for Warren. Warren would have loved to have been here. This was, kind of at the heart of where he engaged with social change practices, and certainly the Latin American lessons and approaches and initiatives and things within the CI. We have looked at these as being, kind of leadership programs for SBC at a global level. I think it's fair to say from Warren that a key thing that I think we need to consider when we're thinking about SBC is that the social element and the behavioral element are different approaches that create some tension within our approaches, because the behavioral change approach, while being a very important tool, is also largely individual in its focus. And that's why, like Warren was always insisting that we use the terms separately: social change and behavior change. Both approaches and tools that can be used, but quite different in their application and often quite different in their results. So that's a tension I think that everyone in the field has to be aware of and work within, without saying that one needs to, be the only road forward. And maybe just because much of my experience, Warren and I over the past probably 10, 12 years divided our work up, and I ended up largely working on polio, and therefore largely working in India, then Nigeria, now Pakistan and Afghanistan. I think broadly, kind of an interesting lesson maybe from the polio program is that it started, and especially in places like Latin America, with a very old-fashioned kind of sender-receiver sort of approach. And, messages were relayed, parents should do this or do that. The focus was on the logistics, making a vaccine available and easy for communities to access. But at a certain point, it hit a wall. And what was the wall? The wall was the communities that we were trying to reach. It was a thing that, putting up posters and telling people when the next campaign was and giving them little snippets of information about why it might be important to vaccinate their children did not work, because it was not responding to the questions emerging from communities. In many cases, the most underserved communities, the communities that were saying, I've met these people, I've talked to these people who say, my son broke his leg last month and there was no treatment. There was nothing that I could do about him. And yet you guys appear every 6 weeks with this polio vaccine, and hundreds of people in our community are hired to do it, etc. So what's going on in terms of this focus on this one thing, a global agenda, versus what we see we need in our communities and what are our priorities. And, it's probably been over the past 10 years that the polio program shifted its focus around communication to emphasize more of the social focus, to try and understand the community's issues, their priorities, to listen to them with respect about concerns, even if they were anti-vax, misinformation, etc., to not just come in and say, you're wrong, we're right, do it our way kind of thing, which have been quite a strong component of this sort of medical behavior change model to how you approach these things. So I think that, the past 10 years, particularly, the social change element in polio has become much more important. But then I would also say that just listening to the communities, taking them seriously, starting to engage them, is also not enough, as we've heard in some of these really good presentations this morning for me, that the systems have to be in place, that you have to be doing, as Robert said, advocacy with the powers that be, with the people that influence the environment, the open spaces that people have to not just ask for their rights, but to have spaces that will allow them to assert those rights. And so when a community says we're rejecting the polio vaccine because we want a health clinic that isn't 30 kilometers away, because we want a bridge fixed in our community, because we want the garbage picked up, because we want a school that actually has a teacher in it for our children. These are the kinds of demands, but I think just leave you with this. The one thing that that I think becomes also very difficult for us as we do this engagement of dialogue with communities, with the people that are most affected by the issues that we're dealing with, is we also have to be doing this other systems work of creating these spaces so that it becomes real in your environment, that you can not just access services, but you can actually, shift your life. But and then there's one more side of that, which I would just lay out, and which may be becoming, unfortunately, increasingly true in Latin America as well. When you are working with systems that do not care about rights, that or they have a totally different perspective on rights. A tribal religious leader in, North Waziristan in Pakistan has a whole worldview around what parenting means and what child rights mean within those concepts that they have. So we've also got this difficulty of how we engage in a respectful way with those communities, and what we're trying to achieve. So the polio program has a very narrow focus. We want to vaccinate enough children to eradicate a disease from the world. I think with many of the programs that Unicef has, where you're looking at child protection, child rights, you're also looking at a much broader, longer term dialogue in which those communities, those community leaders, can through dialogue move in direct, away from what Robert described as, almost anti-rights kinds of positions, to ones that more reflect the rights of the child. And that's a much more difficult global civilizational kind of discussion. And I think we need to find, and things like the polio program may be a way of taking small steps with communities in ways that they understand. I think that's also very important. Certainly has been within the polio program, where in a place like Afghanistan, the polio program is the largest employer of women in that country. And it's shrinking because the government is resisting that. So, but there's a wedge around maybe a somewhat neutral kind of service that may have wider implications. And the more that Unicef can work together on those things, and you're going to get more community response if you use a systems approach, not just with government, but within Unicef. So you bring WASH, you bring child protection, you bring a number of things, but you bring them together as a package, which makes it much, much more important and helpful for communities. And I think might be a good way forward, especially as we find ourselves working in contexts where much of what we're saying is not an accepted message by powerful people in those countries. So anyway, I'll end it there and hope some of that is of use. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris, for your super valuable contributions and bringing this debate between social and behavior change. As I was mentioning in the chat, we are super aware of this process. We have a trend in this region to work more on the social, but we are increasingly supporting the behavior change and the behavioral sciences. But internally, what the organization has been discussing, and some of our colleagues from HQ, is that there should be not separation between both, so that we are not creating more tension, because the sciences are both very complementary. So now, Rafael, that's your turn. We have 7 minutes before our time. That's the risk of being the last one. Over to you.
Thank you, Cassia. Well, we were aware that probably will be short of time, but I'll try to be as brief as possible. So again, thank you for the invitation. Always happy to engage in conversations about SBC and C4D. So I appreciate the opportunity. Second, also to echo what's been said about Warren. I had the privilege of knowing Warren for a long time. collaborating with him on different initiatives. So I appreciate also that we are remembering him today in this space where he was supposed to be. Third, also to thank all the presenters, colleagues, wonderful presentations and remarks. So surely I will not do justice to what's been said, but I'll try to pull in a few ideas that hopefully will contribute to taking this conversation forward. The first thing that I would like to say is that what Ludmila shared, I think it's critical in terms of how we advance the repositioning of child rights, at least in the region, but certainly with implications also for what we are trying to do globally. I think bringing the voices of children and adolescents into our own work and also creating the spaces for them to speak about these issues is absolutely critical. It falls within the work that we do across SBC and certainly provides an opportunity to turn them into narratives, public narratives that become part of the public agenda, of the agenda setting efforts, of the positioning of child rights publicly. So I think that's an important takeaway from Ludmila's presentation, and I think we need to do more of this and more regularly, as I will re-emphasize later. Also, going on Robert's comments in reference to James Grant's views on communication and how communication provided that sort of a spectrum of channels and tools to put child rights at the center, I think SBC in many ways also provides that opportunity. SBC works across all domains, from the individual to the family, the community, the institutional, the public. So how can we leverage the focus of SBC across all those domains to bring child rights to the center of those efforts and connected with the programming work that we do, whether in health, education, protection, climate action? I think we need to bring child rights to the center of our programmatic work. I have these conversations with different colleagues in terms of how we seem to have separated the child rights language from the technical and programmatic language. I think we tend to use child rights as an umbrella term, and then we go on with the technical. I think we need to keep child rights at the center of the technical and programmatic work, because that's the only way to actually make it central to our programmatic agenda where SBC operates. And certainly our Comms and Advocacy College will continue to do this sort of a more sort of umbrella effort in terms of advocacy and position of child rights. So that for me would be one important change and actually leveraging point for SBC in terms of contributing to this agenda. It also would provide an opportunity to engage with different stakeholders, governments, communities, private sector leaders, and so on. So we wouldn't need to have a separate agenda for child rights, but rather an agenda that is integrated across all these efforts that we undertake through SBC. Robert, you also made a reference to several examples of how in the past UNICEF really made a difference in terms of advancing the child rights agenda. I think, and this is connected to the role of the CI, I think there's a lot of lessons that we could learn from those past experiences and look at how we were able to influence different domains in line with the SBC focus. So I think there's an opportunity there as well to document, learn, and share to strengthen our work in this area. Now, also the tension. I also agree that the social and the behavioral are not necessarily exclusive. I think they can be brought together. Some of you may be aware that there's a paper, well-known paper, old but really good paper by Nancy Morris, where she looked at diffusionistic and participatory approaches. It was a study looking at different interventions and so on. Her main finding was that even in diffusionistic sort of approaches, there's space and always there may be an opportunity to do participatory community-driven work and vice versa. When you take a sort of a participatory approach, there is also a dimension of diffusion that is necessary to actually advance your agenda. So I think making that parallel, I think that the behavioral can be participatory, and I think the HUD approach provides that opportunity to bring people to the center of that process of thinking, how can we address specific behaviors that are related, connected to child rights, whether in health, education, protection, and vice versa. I mean, looking at the social, we can also integrate elements of behavioral sciences, nudge approaches, the focus on social norms. So I think they don't have to be necessarily mutually exclusive, maybe not all the time, but certainly I think there is an opportunity to pull together these two dimensions with equal force, so to speak. The other point, and certainly the presentation by Luciana, I think, exemplified that approach. And we know that other country offices are doing similar work. And we have discussed this with Cassia in terms of how it would be really important to pull together examples of practice where the two approaches are brought together. So rather than looking at it as a tension, let's see it as an opportunity. Then two more points. One, building on Chris's presentation, and also some of the points that Markel brought up in his presentation, is the focus on systems. I mean, certainly we, as Unicef, have a key role to play, but in the end is really about how we bring this work to scale. And certainly governments, systems are the way to do this. If we want to really reposition child rights at the center of the public agenda, we need to work with different partners, especially governments, but also other partners that have the capacity to reach scale when it comes to these issues. So again, it's not only about bringing that child rights focus, but it's also about how we engage with key partners, especially governments, through different systems in health, education, protection, to really bring this work up to scale. And I know that the regional SBC team is bringing in a system strengthening perspective, because it will not be really up to Unicef only to achieve this sort of transformation in terms of repositioning child rights at the center of the agendas. And I will end by saying that certainly, as Robert said, Unicef is well positioned as usual to do this. We have a very strong comms and advocacy focus. SBC, as I said already, provides an entry point to connect the child rights agenda with the programmatic agenda very clearly, and facilitating engagement with different stakeholders. And then, of course, in this new effort that UNICEF is doing globally to reposition child rights, for SBC, it is a key opportunity, Cassie and colleagues, to really leverage the capacity that we have and the leadership that we also have vis-a-vis other UN agencies in our interactions with government institutions around this particular approach. So I think that I will leave it there. I mean, I know we're already past the time, but certainly I hope that these ideas contribute to, as I said earlier, to taking this work forward, and hopefully there will be other opportunities to deepen even further these conversations. So again, thank you for the opportunity, Cassie and colleagues.
Thank you, Rafael. Thank you all. I mean, we are passing 3 minutes. I don't have much to say besides really saying that this is just the tip of the iceberg. I think hosting the SBCC Summit in Latin America in Panama in more or less 2 years' time, less than 2 years' time, it's going to be a great opportunity for us to deepen those discussions and the role of SBC on the child's rights. So for sure, we're going to have lots of interesting participation by them. But bear with us, because we are promising bringing more debate around those issues from Unicef Lacro too. So I'm passing the floor to you, Adelaida, as the co-host of this meeting, of this dialogue. It was not a proper super dialogue because we privilege the participations much more. But thank you, Rafael and Chris, for wrapping up and bringing this all a little bit more sense. Over to you, Adelaide, and thank you from behalf of the Latin American, the Caribbean Country Office. Oh,
No.
Regional Office.
Thank you, Kasia. Thanks for everyone. And yes, I think that, I mean, we always struggle with the fact that we would need another half hour for discussion and dialogue. It's always a frustrating, sense of time that you need more. But I think it's a sparking debate. And thanks for everyone. And thanks, Rafael and Chris, for that perspective. And I guess our commitment is to continue these dialogues. And that's what Warren would have wanted. I just want to end saying that Jair has been, ill, but he's going to contribute in the chat. I hope he's listening to me with a final thought. And I'm also contributing with Son de Tambora, which is our drum beat in Latin America that makes a tribute to Warren and his thinking about Latin America. And it's an interesting historical perspective of what he thought, what kind of projects he highlighted, and everything that has been said cuts across these summers. I'm just going to share it. Those of you that are not subscribed to Drumbeat or to Son de Tambora, please do, because there's a lot of Spanish-speaking people. So I've just put the link there, and it kind of cuts across, these issues of social movements, issues of politics, issues of systems, issues of the state. And if you just bear with us, and Juana Marulanda, who's here from my team, and Silvia have been part of that tribute, and collects the principles of communication social change, the debates about the S in the social change. And I agree, Chris, that we do need to keep that social change and behavior change. And I saw from our colleague from Unicef, Bazan, from Mexico, muchas gracias for sharing, Juan Antonio, the perspectives from behavior change. So just to say, it's great to have another space. I hope we can continue next year, Kasia, with a couple of dialogues. Hope we can add another 20 minutes. And I'm not sure whether Jair had a chance to post. Oh yeah, there he is, Jair. So just to allow people to read your thoughts in the chat. Jair has been a critical member of this team of both the Norte counterpart in the SBC team that Kasia leads with Markel, and also with the Communication Initiative Latin America. So thanks, Jair, for participating, and just hoping that we can continue next year with a couple of discussions. And as I said, Chris, thanks for joining. I think the polio, I reiterate that there's a lot of lessons learned, even if you say that Afghanistan is too far in polio. It really has constructed a lot of very robust knowledge for the field that you have actually, been able to synthesize. So I hope we can actually blend that thinking. And lastly, yes, we have that challenge, Kasia, together with you guys, Robert, Chris, to inform and really critique the field in the Panama Summit in 2026, right? I'm lost. Is it? So there's a challenge there. So let's keep on building the discussion. Robert, great to have you here. It was actually Warren's suggestion that you would be with us, and it's fantastic to have the colleagues as dear to us as you. And again, thanks. I guess I'm speaking on Chris' behalf for the comments around Warren, and Kasia, your welcoming words were really touching. So thank you very much.
Welcome. So bye-bye, everyone. Thank you. Till the next time. Ciao.
Bye-bye.
Gracias,
Thank you.
gracias. Gracias, Robert. Thank you.
Gracias. Thank you. Buenas tardes.
Bye, everybody.
Chao, gracias, Luzmila. Gracias, Mina. Markel, muchas gracias.
Chao.
Gracias.
Chao.
Chao, colegas.
Gracias, Juan Antonio. Gracias.
Gracias,
¿Te tienes que dar un
Adelaide, por
ratito?
todo.
¿Te tienes que volar? ¿2
Yo
segundos?
diría que tengo que parar la grabación y podemos hacer un debriefing.
Dale, exacto. Ahí está. A ver, que se
Chao,
quede Juan.
queridos.
Ahí está Juan, hasta allá.